I appreciate the discussion. I think it's been great. I think this has been a valuable issue. I think property rights are important. I want to talk a little bit about the process. I spent quite a bit of time with Britt to kind of pick her brain and to work with her, and I really appreciate that. And I appreciate also the change that we've had in the city attorney's office. I think that has been huge for this council. It's a huge step forward, and I think it has made a huge difference in how we will process our issues and make decisions. To me, the issue was not to change the public use of eminent domain for economic development or enhancement of tax revenue, because that was made in the legislature in 2006 when I was in the House. So when I looked at this particular ordinance and trying to decide whether to support it or not, the issue of the takings is not the issue to me. There are a couple issues that I wanted to address, and one is it enforceable? Does it make practical sense the way it's written? Does it make an opportunity for us to protect property rights, like which I think they should? And I will give you a couple concerns that I have about it, then I'll give you a couple things that I think are good about it, then I'll tell you my decision. The first section of the bill, or the ordinance, which is one that I brought up quite a bit, is somewhat troubling to me because of some of the words that are used. And the word that was used was the city council may authorize exercise the power of eminent domain to acquire interest in real property only for public use. Public use means exclusively, and it lists 4 things that it lists. And those things are listed in their property acquired by the city, traditional governmental use. Property cannot be dedicated, leased, or sold unless it's 10 years or 3 years, and it cannot include public benefits of economic development. I think those types of sentences, and the fact that it doesn't say and or, it's very restricting, and I think, frankly, the extra definitions of how it's described in Section 4 of tax revenues, employment, general economic health are troubling as far as the clarity of that particular section of the statute. I think they'll possibly make the opportunity for this to be litigated due to the fact of how those are stated, and although I think the intent of it is appropriate as far as it goes, this way it goes. The one thing that was mentioned earlier today is, should we list or not list the uses for eminent domain? And that is found in Section D. I'll just talk about a couple issues for me. I think this list, you can either say you can use it for everything you want to use it for, or you can limit the use to specific things. I think the way this list is done in a way that is restrictive and not appropriate. I frankly also do not like the definitions for blighted and for abandoned, and I think that they have some areas that are difficult. They further restrict the ability for this to be used, but it also is somewhat unclear in how those should go forward. So I'm not a fan of those, and every one of them has and I think the property tax issue for me still remains as an unresolved issue. So I think the final thing I'll talk about, and then I'll tell you where I'm at. The process is good. I think it's important. I think I like extra concerns about being able to take property from people and being able to have an opportunity for people to defend their right to property. I frankly am like the man, I forget his name, that came up late, he's sitting on the back row, that came up and said he felt the ordinance fell short in 2 areas. So I would probably agree with his assessment on this particular issue. One is, I think it doesn't go far enough in being simple and making sure that we have the property rights to be able to express what needs to be done. And lastly, I don't think it goes far enough. So in my position, I'm going to be voting today to not accept this as a ordinance for this body, but I will also say that I think we should do something that is different, and I think we should come back with a simple approach, either in the charter or outside of the charter. I'm willing to do either one, and I'm willing to take an honest look, a hard look, making it simple and something that is easy to define and collaborative so everybody can be on board and take it. So here's what I would suggest. I would suggest we do an ordinance that has one sentence. The taking of private property through the use of eminent domain for the purpose of transferring that property to any private entity, profit or nonprofit, is prohibited, period. The only exceptions would be to apply to condemnation of private property that has been abandoned or has been condemned as a public nuisance. And we found those two sections that we talked about today. I think there were 38 and 31. For definitions, abandoned to me would mean that the property tax has not been paid by the owner of record for a period of at least 3 years. The minimum price paid for condemnation of abandoned property should be that at least of the tax liens that are issued by the county treasurer. Public nuisance to me should mean a building that fails to meet the reasonable health and safety standards imposed for the city and the owner for the period of at least 2 years, that they refuse to make repairs to bring the building into compliance. That would be the extent of what would need to be necessary. We would protect the property rights of everybody who would prevent their property from ever being transferred to a private entity. It would be very tight, it would be very close, that the only exceptions would be for condemnation and also a condemnation for public nuisance. And I would accept and work with anybody on that issue for either a charter amendment or an ordinance. And so I will be a no vote today.